Hello, my name is Brent Coltharp, President of Urshan College and Urshan Graduate School of Theology. Thank you for joining us this week for the Urshan Leadership Minute. We hope you've enjoyed these episodes that come out each week, and we hope you'll encourage someone else to join you as we all grow together in the study of leadership. Today I want to continue to talk a little bit about some of the dangers of reward-centered leadership. Not long ago, I read a book by Patrick Lencioni on the motive, and he was talking about the motive behind why people get involved in leadership. And he mentioned there's reward-centered leadership, and then there's responsibility-centered leadership. We've talked about reward-centered and responsibility-centered leadership. We all know that we enjoy the rewards of leadership. That's just a common part of our humanity. But yet there's a higher calling, and that is to be responsible in our leadership, be responsibility-centered. And one of the things that he found out in his study is that when we become reward-centered, we will only do those things which give us rewards. You know, it begins to be the fuel in our tank. And we will start to avoid the things that we don't really feel good about or we don't feel give us that reward, so we will neglect our responsibilities. And this can be devastating for an organization. It's like maybe being a youth pastor in a local church, and you like the affirmation of the students that you are leading, maybe to be cool, be their best friend, have that relationship. And so as a result, many times you will only do the things that give that affirmation. And as a result, we won't have the hard conversations or the difficult lessons. It's the same thing as a father, as a parent. I want my children to love me, and I absolutely love it when they tell me how great I am or how much they love me or how much they appreciate me. And yet I have to tell them no sometimes, and it is painful to take that responsibility and to say, no, I'm sorry, we can't do that. My parents used to say this, and I didn't think they were telling the truth. They would say, and maybe you've heard this is going to hurt me a whole lot more than it's going to hurt you, or this is painful for me. And I couldn't understand how them saying no to me or having a difficult conversation, I couldn't understand how that would be painful for them. And that's because I didn't understand leadership. There's a lot of parts of leadership that are pleasant and they have rewards attached to them, but there's a lot that is about responsibility, and it's about sacrifice, and it's doing what's best for the organization, for our families, for our departments. In fact, I believe personally most individuals get involved in leadership because they have the right motive. They want to do something important. They want to make a difference. And as people work hard, they many times have flattery come their way as they're acknowledged for it. Or they get tired of the fight many times, and it begins to shift their leadership. And so when we talk about the importance of being not reward-centered, but responsibility-centered, we can even go all the way back to the scriptures. Saul, I find it interesting, in 1 Samuel the 15th, Samuel said to Saul, when you were little in your own eyes, were you not head of the tribes of Israel? Did not the Lord anoint you king over Israel? There is a time where Samuel is saying that Saul, you were little in your own eyes. And it was only in his own eyes, because the Bible lets us know that to everyone else, Saul was head and shoulders of everyone else. So it's not that everyone else viewed him as little, but Saul viewed himself as little. He's hiding behind the baggage, and he is identified by God. He is made king. And yet there's a shift that takes place somewhere in Saul's life where the perks of leadership, maybe a John Maxwell phrase, perks over paying the price, where he began to enjoy the flattery that came with being king and Saul has slain his thousands, to there's a shift that took place in his heart. And he went from somebody who was about responsibility to someone who was focused on the rewards of leadership. How about Solomon? I mean, Solomon gets a blank check from the Lord. And the reason he gets a blank check from the Lord, because at the very beginning, here's what Solomon asked for: wisdom to lead the people. He acknowledged that he didn't have all the answers, that he needed God to give him divine wisdom in his life. And when he had that motive, the Lord just gives him a blank check. He says, not only am I going to provide that, I'm going to do so many other things in your life. You're not going to have to worry about wealth. You're not going to have to worry about power, the things you need to govern. But once again, we see as time goes, there's a shift that takes place in Solomon's life. I want to let you know that I believe you and I and most people, as I said a few moments ago, we got involved in leadership because we felt a responsibility. We felt a need, a cause. We wanted to serve, to tie in with this idea of servant leadership, to serve the organizations, the causes that we engaged in. And yet we all have to be careful that a shift doesn't take place somewhere down the line where it stops being about the responsibility of leadership and we start enjoying the perks or the privileges and the rewards of leadership, and there's a shift that takes place in our heart and among our motives. Lencioni talks about things that indicate that a shift has taken place from being responsibility-centered to being reward-centered. I want to name a few of those today in the remaining time that we have together. First of all, it's about team development. That responsibility-centered leaders understand the importance of developing a team. Think about the scriptures. As a pastor, I'm a pastor of a local church, and I know that one of my primary responsibilities is to equip saints, to develop them, to equip them to do the work of ministry. This might not be on a card on Pastor Appreciation Day where somebody says, this is what we expect of you or the expectation, but this is what God expects of me, that as a responsibility-centered leader is to develop and equip other people. Now, if I become about reward-centered, I'm going to shy away from that because I'm going to focus on just the things that have to do with me. And responsibility-centered leadership has to say, no, we need to develop the team and develop others. In fact, that is a part of that servant leadership as well. It's about managing people. Part of leadership is management, and in a future session, we'll talk about the difference between leadership and management. But I have to manage the organization as well, meaning we have to make sure that there's alignment between our ministries, our departments, that it all works together. And sometimes that's very awkward as well because we have to pull in a department or we have to challenge another director to make sure we are all in alignment, that we don't get all focused in our own visions for our ministries or organizations. We develop a silo mentality. And so that is a challenge because most of the time we don't like to manage people. In fact, we talk about micromanagement and overmanagement, and yet the fact is that the only people that call it micromanagement are those who do not want to be held accountable. That it is our responsibility as a leader to say, no, this is our vision, this is our mission. These might be good things, but this is not what we are called to do. We have to get in alignment. And that is what leaders do. When we start saying, well, I don't want to deal with that particular leader or manager, or we avoid those things in our life, we have started enjoying the privileges of leadership rather than taking on the responsibility of leadership. Tied closely to that is difficult conversations, candor, confrontation, or as I like to say, carefrontation, that we care enough to have those difficult conversations. There are always times where something is not going right in the organization, and when we start convincing ourselves we don't need to address it, we'll let someone else handle it, or it'll eventually take care of itself. Now again, I know timing is important. I know that we need to pray about it and we need to do things right. But when we just start avoiding our responsibilities, then we become more about the privileges of leadership rather than the responsibility of leadership, and our organizations will suffer. Communication is another one of those things. We are the chief reminding officer. It is our responsibility to constantly talk about the mission, the vision, our values. We have that responsibility, and you cannot over-communicate. We can't do this through a vision casting sermon in January and then expect it still to be there in March and June, July and November, because that leaks out. We have to constantly be communicating to our organization the direction that we're going, our values, and who we are. And then the last thing is meetings. Meetings are one of the most important things that we do as leaders, and yet many times we get weary of meetings. I know, I'm there, I'm with you. We think about things that we can do, and many times there's so much to do. But meetings are a critical time where we do set that direction with our teams and make sure we're in alignment. And when we start avoiding those, whether it's departmental, whether it's one-on-ones, however our current structure is, our organization begins to falter. We're not communicating, we're not having the difficult conversations. Things begin to grow and multiply. So I want to encourage you today. I know that you got into leadership because you felt the responsibility, and there is no doubt that you have made a lot of sacrifices in your leadership throughout the years. That's what leaders do. I want to encourage you to make sure you stay committed to responsibility-centered leadership, because as time comes, whether it is through flattery, whether it is through fatigue, getting tired, it is easy for us in our flesh to take a shift and to leave being a responsible leader and begin to lead because we feel like it's a right, it's something that's owed us, to get offended, to get things in our heart that would make a shift take place, just as it has in Saul or Solomon and so many others in the past. And so let's make a commitment together that we're going to stay fresh, we're going to make sure that we keep our hearts and our spirits right, and we are going to lead because there is an awesome responsibility and a task that has been entrusted in us to give our best for the kingdom of God. And so let's do what responsible leaders do. Thank you for joining us this week once again for the Leadership Minute here at Urshan College. We hope that these are providing some value to you, and we want you to encourage somebody to join us as we grow together in studying leadership, because leadership makes a difference in the church and in our world.